Well, all right. Well, it is officially 10:30. Welcome, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon and evening, depending upon where you are in the world. I'm so excited to be here to talk, have women talking space for a long time, and I'm sure many of the women on this panel can understand this. I've been in a lot of rooms where I was the only woman in the room for a long time, especially in the space world. But what I will say is I really appreciate when I find other women who appreciate space the way that I do. And like many of the women on our panel, you know, working in space was not the plan for my life at all. I wanted to be a rock star. For a long time, I was an entertainment person. I was a singer-songwriter. I was signed. I toured all over the world singing backgrounds for other artists. And then I ran a media company. And I always say that prepared me for life with astronauts because astronauts are kind of the rock stars of the space world. And so I have been very privileged to have managed Apollo 11 astronaut Buzz Aldrin. I now work with Apollo 16 moonwalker Charlie Duke, and who is becoming my favorite astronaut, Nicole Stott, shuttle astronaut, ISS astronaut, who's just an amazing human as well as not just an amazing astronaut. So I just wanted to give a quick introduction of myself and why I'm moderating this panel. I call myself the astronaut wrangler, which some people say, oh, that doesn't sound very nice. But the funny thing is the astronauts think it's hilarious. So, because people would say, you're the astronaut whisperer. And I would say, there's not a lot of whispering going on. It's more like wrangling. So now I'm wrangling a bunch of ladies that I love, that love space too. And I particularly wanted these women because I didn't want the usual suspects. There are a lot of women who are out there speaking on a lot of panels, but I want space to become very relatable for people like me who weren't in the space world before and who loved space but had no idea what was going on. So I really admire the ladies on this panel. We all came to this from very different angles. So I'm going to introduce each one and let each one explain who they are, what they do, and how they got to space. So because she's the one up in the top, I'm going to start with Emily Carney.
Hi, my name is Emily Carney. I am a space writer and blogger. I started a blog in 2010 called This Space Available. It's available on the National Space Society website. I also started a group called Space Hipsters in 2011. We started with 4 people, and now we have over, I think, 20,500 people in the group. And yeah, so that's basically what I do.
How to use the mute button here. We'll go to Sean Lynham now, who is in Arizona.
Hi, I'm Sean Lynham, and I am the CEO and co-founder of Qualtech. Qualtech specializes in mission control and training for space vehicles. I got my start in the space industry at NASA at Johnson Space Center, training astronauts. And I did not initially plan to be in the space business. I actually thought that that was for people much smarter than I felt that I was, even though I was majoring in biomedical engineering and had aspirations of becoming a doctor or something that I guess sounded like it gave back to humanity. And I quickly discovered that I didn't have the stomach for medicine and ended up getting hired at Johnson Space Center to work on the crew health care system for space station. And then that led to my love of space. Quickly fell in love with it, quickly found out you didn't actually have to be a rocket scientist to work at NASA and that there were so many other jobs. So from there, I've been in the space industry ever since, and now have my own company, which was another dream of mine. So I get to combine 2 dreams.
All right, we will go next to Jennifer Thompson, who's tuning in from Portland, Oregon.
Right, and early over here. Sean, I loved hearing about your history. You inspire someone like me. I'm super late to the space party. I've been working in branding and design and software development for 15 years. And it was only 1 year ago this month that I decided that I wanted to try and work in the space industry. It was 5 years ago that I went to JPL, which is a Jet Propulsion Laboratory. It's actually where Perseverance, the rover that just landed in Mars, that's where it was built. And I went to the campus just on a tour, and walking around and seeing the engineers out and talking about space, I literally was blown away. I was like, what is this industry? I want to work in here so bad. And then I went home and I looked up jobs at JPL, and I realized that I would have to uproot my family and move if I wanted to work in the space industry. And that just made me so sad. And I just sat on it for 4 years. And it was 1 year ago this month that I had a friend of mine who said, stop it. You really want to work in space. Just go figure it out. You know, maybe you can't move, to Florida or Texas right now, but figure it out. And so I did. I started with a pen and a paper, and I just started figuring out the space industry, like who's doing what contracts are being given, and this and that. And I realized that the space industry is huge and exciting, and there's roles all across the board for all sorts of people with all sorts of backgrounds. I started a space group on Facebook, similar to Emily, called Women Talk Space Exploration. We now have 1,600 members and growing. It's been so fun for me to do this. I reached out to our local space museum, and I've been working with them now, creating a statewide space initiative, which has been adopted and will be starting next year. And in the last few months, I connected through a webinar just like this. I connected with a Seattle startup. Former Blue Origin and NASA engineers are starting the first small space tug for satellite servicing on orbit. And so I've been working with them doing their branding, marketing, and communication strategy. So in less than a year, I have 3 space things I'm doing. I'm getting my feet wet. I'm doing it. I'm so excited. I've met awesome people along the way. I don't know what's next for me, but I know this industry is amazing, and I wake up every morning excited to work in it and figure out my next move. So that's my story in a nutshell.
And I love it because we need the designers and the creatives in it. That's one of the things I'm a big advocate for, is it's not just the STEM people. It is STEAM. I'm a big proponent of STEAM, including the arts. Yeah. We need the people like us who help tell the stories.
So, and I think there's a gap. There's a gap there, where, there's all this stuff happening that so many people don't know about it. And so I'd love to be a person filling that gap.
Yep. So now let's go to Kim. She can tell us about herself, and then we'll start a discussion. So Kim, tell us about how you got to space, what you do now, and where you're going.
Absolutely. I also have a bit of a non-traditional background as to how I got into the space world. I actually got into space because I had a screenwriting fellowship in college, and I would write a script every semester after doing some research on American values. And my last script ended up being a musical comedy about 2 women from across the world competing for a free trip to space. And during that research process, I realized that it's quite difficult to enter into the space industry if you're born in quote unquote the wrong country, so outside of the US or Europe, or if you're born in certain disadvantaged socioeconomic backgrounds. And so I kind of made it my mission to figure out how can I address this problem. And so my first job in the industry ended up being at a startup that was trying to help people around the world make meaningful contributions to the space industry by helping them to track and observe space debris and satellites and things like that, and submit that to an open source catalog. And so ever since I started working in the space industry, I've always been about figuring out different ways to diversify and democratize the industry. And now I recently launched a public relations firm that's specialized in serving space companies. And I also serve as the chair of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee at the Space Frontier Foundation, which is a nonprofit through which I actually got my first job in the space world. And so we're working to develop these diversity, equity, and inclusion toolkits that we're going to share with space companies to help them be able to better attract and retain diverse talent. So we're doing that. And we're also launching a workshop, actually, in addition to a toolkit that'll help folks be able to implement the different strategies and tips that we'll be sharing in the diversity, equity, and inclusion toolkit. So that's what I'm up to right now.
So actually, Kim and I are working on some initiatives that we're going to be doing a live stream later this month about nurses who want to go to space. It's a very interesting conversation because I found out from the Colorado Council of Black Nurses who use use space to engage young people that they mentor into STEM and STEAM. Some of them want to go to space, but it's a non-qualifying profession to apply to be a NASA astronaut, which I've heard lots of different opinions about, but that's a bigger conversation that Kim and I are leading for a different live stream later this month. So, one of the things that I love about space is I think that it's the great unifier. It's something that reminds us that we're all humans on the same planet. And one of the things that I've enjoyed traveling around the world, especially being the fly on the wall of Buzz Aldrin's life, seeing every single day how the Apollo 11 moon landing inspired people from all walks of life, every age, every color, every diverse background. It really gave me a sense of the ways that space can bring people together. It isn't just a technical field. It's much more than that. It's something that awakens the human spirit of who we are. And I made it my mission to try to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Apollo missions. 2 years ago was the Apollo 50th anniversary for Apollo 11. There are still Apollo 50th anniversary missions going on right now. We still have Apollo 15, 16, and 17. Apollo 14 just happened the 50th anniversary. And a lot of people aren't aware of it. And so I keep thinking, how can you make people care about something that happened 50 years ago? But there's a lot of really exciting things going on in space right now. And that's one thing during this past year, during the pandemic. The world stopped, but space did not. We're having more rocket launches than we have ever had. And one thing that I've learned is that there is a major NASA program right now called Artemis. Artemis, the twin sister of Apollo, the goddess of the moon. And what Artemis is to send the humans on the next missions to the moon. But what I find most exciting about it is that it's meant to put the first woman on the moon. And when I tell people that who are not in the space world, they're like, what? So let's talk about Artemis, because I think that if there's a way to get the mainstream public, especially people who are outside of the space world, to understand what Artemis is and get more support for it, I think we can hopefully maybe make more progress with it. So anybody want to pipe in on their thoughts about Artemis and what it means to you?
Well,
I can pick someone. Yeah, we'll start with Emily.
Well, first of all, I want to say thanks for inviting me to this panel. I'm very humbled. I'm a little tongue-tied because these are amazing women here. I'm very honored to be among them. Artemis, to me, I think Christine and I have discussed this previously. I do a podcast called Space and Things, and we did discuss this. While I love the idea of Artemis, and I love the idea of putting, a woman on the moon for the first time. That'll be amazing. I don't think a lot of people outside of the space community really realize, what NASA is doing with Artemis. If you just talk to like a regular person, on the street or wherever, they're going to be like, what? I don't even know what that is, And I think it's my opinion, and I know, like I said, Christine and I have discussed this. I think the NASA needs to be a little more kind of aggressive, I guess, with their, PR surrounding Artemis. Like, they did this great poster, I think, a few months ago that showed all the Artemis astronauts. And I think that was a nice first step because it was very equal, men and women, which was cool. But I don't think anybody really saw that outside of kind of the space community, or anybody really got excited about that outside of the space community. So I wish they would almost do like sort of a campaign, and I'm not throwing shade at NASA here. I don't want to make it sound like I'm criticizing them, but I wish they would almost do like a campaign with like a woman, somebody who's obviously, a woman, or somebody steps on the moon, and then they put their visor up and it's obviously a woman on the moon for the first time, because I think all of us can agree, representation is really important. I remember growing up in the 1980s as a young, Jewish girl growing up and seeing Judy Resnick for the first time and being like, oh my God, this is incredible. And just seeing her work in the space shuttle with her hair, all up and stuff. And I was like, I remember seeing that as like a 6-year-old and thinking, that's what I want to be. Like, I want to have that kind of, I didn't think I would be Judy Resnick exactly, but I wanted to have that kind of freedom. So I think it's really vital that, we see something similar to that nowadays. Maybe NASA can put something together now like that nowadays, like an ad or something, to kind of get people excited, about what this really represents.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that, kind of really focusing on the women aspect of it, even if it's not a specific woman that's in the astronaut group, I think the idea of showing a woman that's clearly a woman standing on the moon would be something to get people excited about. And also, because I talk to educators and they have no idea. They don't know what Artemis is. And I really do think if people understood that part of it is a big part of the first mission to land on the moon, that would gain a lot more support. I mean, Sean, you're working in the industry, what are your thoughts? Or, I understand that's probably kind of maybe things you can't talk about. I don't know. But what is your role in Artemis?
Well, first, I was going to agree with what you said, that there really needs to be people like all of you that are better at getting the word out. I think we talked about the other day that people like me aren't so good at social media or sharing what they're doing. And so I think there's a gap that needs to be bridged there, where we really are getting the word out. As far as, just like all of you, I'm incredibly inspired by Artemis. Human spaceflight is still my first love, although I'm interested in all of it because I think there's so much advancement from the space industry. But I also have a little different perspective as well. I think NASA is fabulous for the inclusion of women and the there's still some, male domination, and I've certainly been the only woman in the room many times as well. But I've worked in another industry where I was literally the only woman in the room and the first woman they ever hired in a technical position. So it was quite refreshing for me when I went to NASA and suddenly I was surrounded by other female engineers. And so it was really incredible to go from all men to also having many women working on the program. And I think that one of the reasons is that as the work I've done in STEM is that I've learned that women are motivated by ways that they can make a difference or give back, more altruistic means versus, men who traditionally may be more motivated by the widget or the gadget. But women want to see, how can I make a difference in society? And so I think it's been really great to see how NASA has also embraced the commercial industry. So many of the companies that are building lunar landers, that are working on getting us to the moon are all commercial companies, which have been, become the inspiration for men and women. And so, yes, I'm still working to get that first contract for Artemis. So I get to work around it a little bit at the moment, but haven't closed that first contract. But I do think that that the space industry is just a fabulous place for women, and all that's missing is a little bit of marketing.
Yeah.
She said.
I agree. Jennifer, do you want to pipe in on that?
Well, just more of the same. A year ago when I started investigating all of this, I kept seeing the word Artemis here and there, and I could not figure out what it was. It was just, there was no clear message. And so I had to actually sit down and really read about it and go, oh, I get it. They're gonna put people back on the moon, and this time they're gonna keep them there permanently. Oh, they're gonna build a lunar gateway. It's gonna be like the space station, and it's going to orbit around the moon, and they're gonna have a lander, and that's what these contracts are for. That's what they're building. I get it. And, but I really had to piece it together, and I don't think I should have. I think I agree with Emily. There should be a really awesome campaign. I don't know how it should be executed.
Well, you're kind of unusual in actually doing your own research on it. I mean, I think a lot of people would stop at, oh, that's what it is. And then they would, if it didn't have something else to pull them in, I'm not sure that they would be pulled in.
And and I was so inspired by Artemis. It's like, we have a goal again. Our country has a goal again, kind of like the Apollo missions. And like, how exciting. Like if I take my daughters on a summer walk and we look at the moon, I start telling them, hey, pretty soon there's going to be people on the moon again. I was born after the Apollo missions. I don't have any of those memories, and I'm starting to think about having those memories. It's really exciting. And so, we need to bridge that gap. We need to get people out of who are not in the space and excited about it. And if I talk to people that I meet, casually, and I start talking about it, they get so excited. They're like, I had no idea. So,
Yeah, I think that's just the thing is more when people start to understand what it is, they get really excited. And this even happened with the White House with the new Biden administration, where somebody asked the press secretary, and she didn't know what Artemis was. Granted, just started. And then the next day she said, oh, I know what Artemis is now. I'm so excited, and I can't wait to talk to my daughter about it. That's the thing. I think that's.
And just think that was only a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
So we, there's so much that has to be done to get Artemis out there.
Yeah. Kim, do you have any thoughts on Artemis?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what's been said so far. And I actually think it's almost a good thing that the message of what Artemis is hasn't been fully exposed to the public, because NASA can really take advantage of this and really decide exactly what they want to communicate. Because right now the public virtually knows almost nothing about Artemis. Most of my friends don't know what Artemis is. And I think that there are a lot of cues that NASA can take from private missions as well, especially with the newly announced Dear Moon mission, which for those who don't know, there's a Japanese billionaire who wants to take a crew of 8 civilians, mostly creatives, on a journey around the moon. And that mission is set to happen in 2023. So that alone is so exciting. They've done a really, really brilliant campaign. I believe they have over 300,000 or so signups, which is insane. It's happened in less than a week. And so NASA really ought to be taking cues from initiatives like this and leverage that for the Artemis mission. Yeah. And I think it also needs to quickly take notice of its past, I wouldn't say failings, but lackings when it comes to diversity, right? Because only about 90% of all astronauts have been men, right? So only around 10% or so of astronauts have been women. And that's something that NASA really needs to own and prove to the public that it's actively and intentionally working to target this issue and rectify it.
Well, it's interesting that you brought up the Dear Moon thing, because it was actually announced a couple of years ago around the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11. So I've actually kind of in the back of my head been wondering what's happening with this Dear Moon thing, because Inspiration 4 got announced, which is also and that's supposed to be happening this year, where it's 4 civilian crew members, not professional astronauts, that will be orbiting the Earth for 3 days. And that was a billionaire named, is it Jacob Isaacson or something like that? And he's the main one on the mission. He is a pilot. And then he chose the first other crewmate was a woman who had childhood cancer at St. Jude's, and then she is a physician's assistant now. And so he has yet to announce the 2 other people who will be on that mission. But the interesting thing about it to me that didn't get as much response as Dear Moon has already with this second announcement, because I think what they did really, really well was this filter where you could put your face in that SpaceX spacesuit and it would customize to your country. And that's what I think, that kind of branding marketing is what invites people in, that makes them think, wow, I could look good in that suit. That's what I thought right away. I was like, I would look good in that suit. And so, it makes you put it on, you share it. It starts, people go, what's Dear Moon? And then they, I think if NASA could do that with Artemis in a way, especially like put your face in that spacesuit, and, hashtag Artemis, that's a campaign I think that they could do that would get people excited again. I want to point out that, so we're kind of jumping into, I was going to go into Perseverance, but let's first go to commercial space, because Dear Moon and Inspiration 4 are SpaceX missions. And so SpaceX is technically a commercial company, but they do rely on government contracts to run. I mean, most people don't understand that it is taxpayer dollars that are paying for most of those launches that are going. Those are government contracts to take crew and cargo to the space station. That being said, Starship is what's really attracting people's attention outside of the space world right now. And it occurred to me that the urgency with why they're doing so much with that is because of Inspiration 4 and because of Dear Moon, that they've got to get those figured out sooner than later. So I saw somebody the other day when I posted about the Starship. We can explain this, SN 8, 9, 10. SN 10 was the launch attempt that was the other day to actually launch it and land it, and then it blew up. Some people said, oh, it's so irresponsible. I can't believe they're doing that. I personally think it's actually wonderful transparency. And as my husband said, this buildup is gaining more support because then you get to see the progress, which I think builds more excitement around it. What do you guys think?
I guess I'll go first. I agree. I like the transparency that they're actually doing it in public, even if, I want to emphasize the Starship missions are the tests, that they're test missions. Test flights are, most test flights, they're supposed to figure out, okay, is this going to fail or not? Is this going to have problems? Do we need to improve this? Or this or whatever. So I think, it blew up at the end, but it was, it's a test flight. It's probably good that they figured that out now versus figuring it out when it's actually, has people on it, I really love what commercial space is doing personally. I'll try to keep this short because I could go on about this forever. I really love what they're doing. I feel like, during the 1970s, there was kind of this dream that became popular in the media of, okay, we're going to have, regular people going to space and we're going to see that. And it kind of died out, during the ensuing decades, where most of the people going to space are, and not to criticize NASA or any organization, most of the people we see going to space have been, highly trained, astronauts or professionals and stuff like that, which is fine. But, I think now we're starting to see the promise of, okay, maybe, regular people can go to space. Like with Inspiration 4, when they announced that a cancer survivor would be going to space, I mean, I just broke down and wept as somebody who's had, personally cancer touch my life. Just to hear that was like, okay, they're sending a regular person up. Like, this is incredible to me. So I really love what they're doing. And I think we're starting to sort of see the promise that, of regular people going to space. I think we're starting to see it get fulfilled.
Well, and I was going to say, Buzz Aldrin, he started a nonprofit called ShareSpace in 1996 that was to buy a spot, basically, almost like a lottery ticket, almost like what's happened with Inspiration 4, which was you become a member of this for like $100, and then it's a lottery, so to speak. But it was such an expensive endeavor. And to be honest, like 20, something years ago, I just really don't think people were ready for the idea of space tourism. But incidentally, John Denver, the singer, was trained to go to space, and Buzz was a big advocate for him because he felt we need to send someone like that, someone who can write a song about this experience. That's why I think even some astronauts and some people who are technical understand the value of sending someone who can convey it in a way that's relatable, to the broader public. And that's the exciting thing about Inspiration. Dear Moon, I think, is that he really wants to bring creatives along for that journey. And so that maybe is what's getting more participants, because then you feel like I could go, anyone can go. I'm not good at math, I'm not good at science, but I could maybe help tell this story, when we come back. So, Jennifer?
Okay, so does that mean that if you won a spot on one of these, would you go? Would you get in the rocket and would you do it?
I think I would do it if I saw a couple of test flights that were successful first. I don't want to be the beefeater. I don't want to be the test subject, but I'm willing to.
But you would go. You think you would go?
To the moon, I would go.
Yes. Okay.
In orbit? Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Kim, you kind of nodded really quick. Would you go?
Oh, no, not it. I think I need like at least 5,000 of, I would like to be like 5,001, the 5,001st person to go to space. I want to let all the other diehard fanatics who are ready to go live on Mars and whatnot get their seat first, and then I'll just casually follow suit.
Yeah. What about you, Sean? You work with astronauts and getting and training them. Would you do it?
I was probably one of the, 2 people in a room of 400 that wouldn't raise my hand to go. I do want to go, but like Kim, I've done a lot of work. Space is still hard and space is still risky. And I think that leads back to perhaps why NASA did want to send civilians to space, but then, the first experience with that was Krista McCullough. And yeah. So I think that made NASA very gun shy to want to continue that. And so it's taken a long time to get back to that. And space is still hard. It's still very risky. And, when I left NASA and first started hearing of commercial, I left to go to a commercial company, but a commercial satellite program, the first large satellite program. But when I heard about commercial human spaceflight, I'm like, well, that can't happen. Only NASA can do that. So I was one of those. And then when I got contacted to work with one of the early commercial human spaceflight companies, I quickly became a convert because I went, this is exciting. And so I have loved enabling people to go to space. And I loved training astronauts, but was not one of the ones that wanted to go myself. The one time that changed was when I got to go on the KC-135 and experience what weightlessness felt like. I didn't get that, looking back at the Earth, that's supposed to be life-changing, but even just that feeling of weightlessness.
You're talking about a zero gravity flight.
Yeah, zero gravity flight.
Yeah.
And but no, right now I am fine to be patient. I always said I'd go when my kids were grown. Well, they're getting close to that, but maybe now in another 20 years, I'd be ready.
My kids assume we're going. My 6-year-old son is like, keeps saying, where do you keep your spacesuit, Mama? Are you trying to hide it from me? Is it when I turn 7? So my kids automatically think we're just all going to space together and that Papa's not coming because he doesn't like space. So.
I think Emily would go, though.
Would you go, Emily?
Yeah, I would go in a heartbeat. I would go in a heartbeat. Yeah, I don't. It sounds awful. I don't have kids. If I had children, it would probably be a different story. But I think my husband would understand. So I think he would. Allow it.
He's not coming.
Okay, whatever. I get that. So yeah, I would go in a heartbeat.
Oh,
well,
awesome.
And so the thing is those missions that we're talking about, the Inspiration 4 and the Dear Moon, those are big missions. I mean, what's been in the works for a long time are the suborbital flights, which is just touching the edge of space. Yeah. We're talking Virgin Galactic, and we're talking Blue Origin. Though there used to be a company called X-Corps that was also doing it with a smaller runway lander. That's what they call, and that's the difference between Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin. Virgin Galactic is going to land on, it's like a plane that lands on a runway when it comes back, whereas Blue Origin is like a space capsule, the way that you see at the top of a rocket. So when it comes down, it needs parachutes for it to land. And I mean, they're both very exciting, but very, very different experiences. Going on Blue Origin in a space capsule is much more open. They have big 6-foot high windows all the way around. Virgin Galactic is much more like a plane. And Virgin Galactic's been going for a long time. They're hampered by some problems. They've been having some troubles. And so, the people who signed up for those flights, $200,000 for the first round, I think, of people who bought flights, and then it increased the price to $250,000. I will say I know a lot of people who bought those tickets, and they're getting pretty impatient for it to happen. Blue Origin has a huge advantage because Jeff Bezos owns that company. He has no shareholders. He's able to test behind the scenes and not have the pressure of the stakeholders pressuring him about what he can and cannot do. So he's got the advantage of being able to test and try to get it right before he ever sells a ticket. I would say if I had my choice right now and one of them was ready to go, I would probably go with Blue Origin, just because of the idea of the big windows, getting to really see things right. Anyone who knows me knows I'm a total photoaholic and videoaholic, so I'm gonna be snapping that like crazy. So
how long will those Blue Origin tourist trips last? Is it a few hours? Is it half?
No, it's pretty quick, actually. It's about 15-minute flight.
Okay, so you go up 15 minutes and right back down.
The whole thing might take 15 minutes. Because basically you are launching, you're hitting the edge of space, and then gravity's bringing you right back down again. So you're getting, minutes of weightlessness, longer than just a parabola on a zero G flight. But it's definitely not like going into orbit. You need a much bigger rocket than what they're able to use. How much will Blue Origin flights cost, do you think? We don't know yet. They have not listed anything. And, so I know a lot of people who want to do it. It's, when they're ready to go, I'm quite confident they're not going to have any problems selling tickets. Yeah. And what I had heard at one point from Blue Origin is that when they're ready to go, they built quite a big facility at Kennedy Space Center. And they've moved all the roads around the visitor center there, if you haven't been there for a while. And I heard that the reason they did that was so that Blue Origin could literally do a flight every day when they get going, so that they can wheel a rocket out there every day. And their rockets are reusable as well. As a matter of fact, one thing a lot of people don't realize is that Jeff Bezos' New Shepard rocket, which launches the suborbital, actually landed vertically before SpaceX did. It's not commonly known because they're not real big on their press. They don't promote a lot. They're not quite as high profile as the Spacex missions are.
There's another company that is not going through the atmosphere, so you don't have to pull G's, and it's Space Perspectives, and they're there at the Cape now. So you get a balloon ride to the edge of space, and so you still get that, curvature of the Earth view back. You don't get the weightlessness, but if their plans haven't changed, and I'm not sure I'm current, but they have a loo and a bar, and so you can you can ride to the edge of space in comfort and ride back down and not have the punch through the atmosphere. Which
sounds nice.
I actually am really interested in that one too, because then you get a much longer journey. Mm-hmm. It's actually, you get that view for a lot longer. So I'll be curious to see. But I guess I didn't realize when you get up that high, you are not getting weightlessness. I guess it depends on how long they are up there.
And I think those tickets, they're trying to get them down to a piece. I think that's
fit a lot more people, and it's not the same as having rocket thrust or whatever, right? The way that you're launching. So Martina, who's in the comments or had chatted, saying, when do you think it will be more accessible for people to visit space, and how much will it cost? Well, we know that Virgin Galactic's $250,000 to buy a ticket. So I don't think it will, unless Space Perspectives is able to pull this off. I mean, that would be quite a drastic reduction in cost that would make it more accessible for a lot more people. So I suppose, but I think they're a ways away from being ready as well.
Christina, I don't know if a lot of people know about zero G flights. I mean, I had never heard of these before.
Yeah, so zero gravity flights, and Sean has done it. I've never done it. And so zero gravity flights are basically, they take a plane up high enough to where they do a thing called the parabola, where it's like a wave. So they take it in a way, and maybe you can explain it better, Sean, but basically the way that the trajectory or the way the plane is takes you up high enough, and it gives you 30 seconds of weightlessness on each parabola. And that is a way they train astronauts to get used to the feeling of not having gravity or being in non-gravity. Do you know it better? I don't know it any better than that. I've never done it before.
Yeah, I mean, think about a roller coaster, and so you're climbing, and then you almost, get lifted out of your seat as you drop. So it's the same concept. You're climbing, and then over the top of that parabola, as you head back down, you're experiencing that period of weightlessness. And so if you're going to get weightlessness at the top of the parabola, you get about 2 Gs at the bottom of the parabola. So then when we did ours, you do your experiment or whatever you're doing at the top, and then you lay down on the floor on the way back, because it's around the bottom of the parabola, so that you can, disperse that extra force across your body. And so it's it's like a roller coaster in the air.
Did you get sick when you did it?
I did not. I did it with NASA, so we did about 40 parabolas. Most of the commercial companies do 15 or 20, I believe.
Yeah.
You don't get, because you don't get sick at 15. Because we were doing an experiment or testing something for space station, they did give us drugs to kind of keep us from getting sick, and but that doesn't always work. I did learn cinnamon is my really best friend when sucking on hard cinnamon. But a number of people near the end did get sick, and that makes you even more queasy when you look around and those are big. But I got my certificate that said I did not get sick. I didn't feel great at the end. And then part of the tradition back then was to all go eat spicy barbecue, which didn't help. But that was to prove how tough we were, I think.
Yeah, that sounds like
anyone can buy one of these flights, right? Anybody can sign up for a 0G flight.
Yeah, and there's more than one company that does it. I am doing an exclusive 0G flight with Charlie Duke and Nicole Stott in May. As a matter of fact, if anyone's tuning in and wants to get a spot on that, I have a few places left on that flight. It is Sunday, May 9th, which is Mother's Day. So if you want to take yourself and your daughter, you can come and do it with us and reach out to me. But it'll be my first time, and what I'm excited about is experienced astronauts are going to be the ones showing me how to do it for the first time, showing me the ropes. So I'm very excited about it. Martina asked another question. She said, how high do you need to go to see the Earth as the beautiful blue ball? You got to go pretty far to see the whole Earth. I mean, to actually get out of Earth's orbit. Like the space station is up about 250 miles above the Earth, and you can see the scope of the curve, but you can't see the whole Earth. Not though you got to go pretty far, I think, to get away from the Earth to see it as a ball, as a blue ball.
Probably, like, my guess, I mean, I'm just throwing a number, 3,000 to probably 35 or 3,000 to 3,500 miles probably out. You could see it as a ball or so, because they got satellites that probably operate at that area that can like image the Earth as a sphere.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that's the way that we see it now. Like if we're seeing images of the Earth in pictures, that's satellites that are orbiting pretty far away from the Earth. Well, the other exciting thing that's been going on, of course, which I do think they do an amazing job of the marketing, or at least the awareness, is the JPL. When they send a rover to Mars, man, they know how to get the world's attention on that. And so recently we had the Mars Perseverance rover. I was talking to astronaut Nicole Stott yesterday, and she said, someone said to her 2 days ago, oh my gosh, they put the Perseverance rover on Mars. It's the first time they've ever landed a rover on Mars. And she said she sat there going, oh my God, what? Like, how do they think this is the first time? This is the 5th rover that's actually landed, but not I think it's like the 9th mission, maybe. Emily probably knows better than I do. But I mean, what's most exciting about Perseverance, though, is it's got a lot of like new tricks and bells and whistles that it's going to be doing that, I mean, one interesting thing that I did not know until Buzz started bringing it up is Spirit and Opportunity were 2 rovers that went to the moon, and they were only intended to last for 90 days. It was a 90-day mission. They were supposed to land, do what they were programmed to do for 90 days. Well, I think Spirit went for something like 5 or 7 years, and Opportunity went for something crazy like almost 13 years, which is amazing. So they got way more out of it than they had ever intended. And so, of course, we've got the Curiosity rover up there, or on Mars, that's been there for a while, that's been feeding us a lot of images. But each time they send one, things are a lot faster. They're a lot more efficient. They do a lot of exciting stuff. I mean, are you guys excited about the missions that we're seeing, or what we're seeing from Perseverance?
I guess I'll start. With Perseverance, I think the thing that set it, and I'll keep it short. I think the thing that sets Perseverance a little apart from other missions, we had the first, we didn't have the first rover, but we had the first Mars lander in 1976 with the Viking program. And that was awesome. The pictures are still incredible, but it was compared to what we're doing now, it seems kind of primitive. They could only image really around the area, and it couldn't, obviously it wasn't a rover, so it couldn't move. Perseverance really, it's had the first recorded EDL to my, which is entry descent. I think it's
entry descent landing. Yep.
Yeah, it had the first recorded EDL where they recorded, everything from the perspective of, okay, where, you see the shield pop off, you see the heat shield pop off, and then you see the sky crane maneuver. I mean, you actually got to see it. You get to see, the rover settling down on Mars. You got to see the parachutes and all that. I mean, that really, for me, I think I watched that on a loop like 30,000 times or something. I just couldn't get enough of it. It's just incredible because it's just, I just am blown away by what we can do nowadays. And another thing that's really cool about Perseverance is it's got a little helicopter called Ingenuity. And that is going to be awesome. If we can get pictures from that and sort of see how it works, and I mean, that might be a game changer for like, if we actually send humans to Mars someday, or even not even humans, if we send other spacecraft to Mars, how they can sort of move along, on the planet itself and get, pick up data and things like that. So, it's been nothing but incredible. And I do agree. I think JPL does an incredible job with, selling the whole thing, like, from the reactions of the people in the control room to, I mean, you could, that's always fun, that, and to, actually seeing, a few days later, the images of what happened, images are emotional. They make a lot of sense to people. And I think they just do a really great job of just selling that to everybody. So I think, not to diss NASA, but I think, NASA's human spaceflight program could learn a little from that.
I agree with you. And I was going to say, there was some really cool marketing going on. There was the Mars Donut, which I do not know that it was necessarily in conjunction or partnership with NASA, but it was a brilliant marketing thing that Dunkin' Donuts, Krispy Kreme did, because I as soon as I saw it, I ordered my donuts, and almost everyone I knew ordered the donuts. And then I heard some people saying, I went and the donuts were sold out. I mean, it was a brilliant marketing thing. But what I was going to say is it was a very trying week for Jennifer, because, and also really Kim just before that, because there was a lot of power outages with freezing cold and in some of these cities that are not used to it. But Jennifer, what I love, she had her own Perseverance story, because she decided to go and build a Perseverance cake. And anybody normal would probably just like, oh, well, I have no electricity. I can't make this cake. No, she still made this doggone cake using like Bunsen burners or something like crazy and built it. What did you make it out of, Jennifer?
Well, first of all, we got caught in that ice storm that recently passed through half of the United States, and we lost power for 6 days. But yes, I mean, I literally put on spikes on my shoes and tried to walk to a grocery store to, try to get the stuff. And I mean, it was a nightmare trying to build this cake, but we pulled it off. We built a Perseverance. I mean, I was melting chocolate in one of those portable stoves, with propane, to dip the pretzel sticks in so I could make the neck of the, I mean, it was just ridiculous. But I have so much love for this rover. A year ago, I went to JPL again, and we got to see the rover. We were one of the last groups to see it before it got shipped off to Florida for its flight. And so I actually saw the rover, and now it's on Mars. And I can't, my brain cannot understand this. It's because it's like amazing. And they just did a test, right? They just moved it a couple days ago, and we can now see the the tire tracks in the, in the Martian soil. And to think I saw those tires that made those marks on another planet. I just can't get it. But it's amazing. And I love the helicopter ingenuity. I can't wait for them to test flight that. And it'll be the first time a helicopter has ever been flown,
on another planet. Yeah. Do we know when they're going to do it? Anybody here? I haven't seen anything yet.
I'm not sure yet. Let me try to look.
So Perseverance has just begun to start moving, really. They've been doing a lot of tests to make sure everything's working, and then now it's gotten to move on. So we're seeing the tracks in sand. And
let's not forget the mission behind Perseverance. This rover is looking for ancient life, signs of ancient of life. That's why it landed in Jezero Crater. So I can't even wait to see what we discover from Perseverance. And then there's a sample, return mission that they're planning right now, to get actual samples back from Mars. It'll be interesting to see how that turns out.
What's interesting about Mars too is the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, also recently sent their own orbiter, which is a pretty big deal for such a small country.
Yeah.
And one thing, so that makes me want to touch on a subject which is about inclusivity and diversity. So one interesting thing about the UAE, I've had many meetings and attended many events in the UAE and met with the UAE Space Agency, is that I think at this point in time, about 40-something, like maybe 42% of their workforce is women. And when I asked them about this, they said, "Isn't it like this everywhere?" I said, "No, not even close." And they said that they have a government commitment to getting women to be, interested in working in engineering, especially. And so that's one thing that I think, is a challenge. Working on robots is one thing. Getting the human element is something, and getting a lot more people involved, I think, is what will make it even more exciting. And so, that's one of the things you're focused on, Kim, is the diversity and all of that. I mean, what are the challenges that you see with that you're dealing with? Or do you feel like there's a lot more openness now with what's going on? Does Perseverance help, that sort of thing? What are the things that are going on that you think help or will bring more people in for inclusivity and diversity?
Yeah, I think some of the messaging around Perseverance has been really interesting in regards to the women behind the mission. It looks like the NASA communication team has really done a great job at pushing out some of the key figures who help make that mission happen. And I'm interested to see how they continue to keep that message going, and if they're going to incorporate the same tactics in regards to how they publicize the Artemis missions, because I think that when they first announced the potential candidates for the Artemis mission, the women who were included in that, I don't think they did enough work to really spotlight the importance of why these women were selected and significance of their own experiences and how that's going to benefit them when whoever is selected gets to go to the moon. And I think there's some really interesting marketing initiatives that they can launch there to really capture the public attention and get more people excited about what we're doing, and in turn get more people who want to help, again, behind the scenes and in front of the scenes when it comes to applying to become astronaut candidates or applying for the myriad of jobs that are available at NASA and in the private sector. And I think that we are starting to see some really great shifts when it comes to outreach efforts, because I think that's one of the number one issues when you think about diversity in the space world. A lot of people have this mentality that you want to, hire somebody that you can have a drink with, right? But oftentimes when you think about folks who are leading some of these really prolific companies, the type of people who they want to grab a drink with are people who look like them. And so that really messes up chances for folks who come from more marginalized and diverse backgrounds to be able to get into the industry. So we have to start shifting really our outreach efforts. And I think, again, going back to Perseverance, the way that they were publicizing some really great women, including one Latina woman who came to America as an immigrant, started out as a cleaning lady and worked her way up to being, someone who has a significant influence on NASA's daily operations. And so spotlighting those kinds of stories and in turn using that to do unique outreach efforts to bring in new folks, I think that's going to be really crucial to making sure our industry is inclusive and diverse, because I personally know folks who are actively leaving the industry, women who are actively leaving the industry because they don't feel welcome. And some people can handle some of the microaggressions that you encounter in this world, but some people just don't want to deal with that in their work environment. And so thinking about that too, when it comes to not only attracting diverse people, but retaining it. How do we make people feel welcome and included? So I think there's a lot of work to be done, but we are still making some really great progress.
I will say, and Kim and I talked about this briefly, when they made the Inspiration 4 announcement and then people who were recording their videos about wanting to be selected, I noticed that it pretty much was all, there were almost no people of color who were putting themselves out there. So that's the other thing, though, too. I think that, they need, a lot more people need to be able to put themselves out there as I deserve to go too. I think that it's not only a problem of being included, but also like putting yourself, and that's one thing I really like about astronauts, because a lot of people will say to me, astronauts, they're the elite humans on Earth, right? And I'm like, nah, they're just as flawed as the rest of us, but they're willing to take the risk. They're willing to put themselves out there. And so I think maybe if more people understood that, then they might actually say, what the heck, I've got nothing to lose. I'm willing to go for this too. And frankly, I have to say in my social media, most of the female engineering, women who are pretty high profile right now are women of color. Astronaya is one, Raven the Maven, some of these ladies who are really, really like pushing science and their science and engineering backgrounds out there. Those are the ones that inspire me, watching how they're promoting it for Black girls especially.
I think we have another challenge with attracting women to the industry and to technical fields in general. When I graduated from college, there were 14% of women majoring in engineering. And now that I have a daughter getting ready to graduate from college, there's still 14% of women majoring in engineering. And the statistics show that women or girls start out better in math than boys. And then somewhere along the way, the numbers flip. But I think it's a confidence issue, and it's a narrative that we've allowed to continue. When I hear women say, or when I heard my kids say, I have two daughters, and they'd come home from school and say, I'm not good at math. I can't do math. And, and they were brilliant at math. And I said, you may not say that. You can say it's hard. You can say I don't like it. But you cannot say I'm not good at it or I can't do it, because that's my belief that is typically the problem. It's a belief. It's a confidence issue. It's not an ability issue. And I think that, I ran into that many times in college in particular, sometimes in the workforce, a little bit in middle school and high school, and not a little bit, a lot. I kind of went like this. I like the 0G flights for my confidence in my ability. And it really reflected in my grades. My daughter tells me to share with her female friends who are in engineering to share my GPA when I graduated. And I don't like to do that because it was bad. So I did so poorly my first 2 years because I lost my confidence. I did much better my last 2 years, but it, didn't make up for the poor first 2 years. So I graduated. So I'm going to share with all of you. I graduated from college with a 2.9 grade point average. And I was so glad not to ever include that on my resume. But now I own and run a company, and I've worked in the space business. That grade point has not held me back. But what the change for me was confidence. And so I really think that we need to find a way to give that confidence to our daughters, and not accept the narrative that I'm not good at math.
I think that's a great point because, frankly, I always say that to people. I took the bare minimum of math and science, not because I wasn't good at it. It wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do, but it didn't mean that I wasn't capable of doing what I have done now, which is run a company and which is hold my own against, other men. I have an interesting thing, though, because I'm one of 10 children, 5 girls, 5 boys. And I always say to people that my father didn't really treat the girls like he didn't treat us like we were princesses. And so incidentally, as adults, the girls in my family are much, much more stable, much more successful, do better in our professional lives. I have a very deep voice. I've had a lot of guys say to me, you and that authoritative voice. And I think that some people would take that badly and be like, what? Oh, I'm gonna, talk less. And I'm more like, so I got a deep voice. There's nothing I can do about it, But I mean, I also have not worried about holding my own in a room full of men because I've got 5 brothers and I had brothers on either side of me. So I think that has helped me out a lot. But, it's interesting because Joanne Morgan, and this is where I started getting on women's issues. For the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11, I was interviewing Joanne Morgan, who was the first female engineer at at Kennedy Space Center. And she was the only one who was in the room of mission control at Kennedy Space Center when Apollo 11 lifted off. So if you watch that Apollo 11 movie and you see one woman sitting there, that's Joanne Morgan. And what I love about her story is she said, when she was 17 years old, she saw an ad at the post office that said, we have internships for the ballistic missile program for 2 students. She said it said students. It didn't say boys. And so she applied and she got one of the places. And so out of all the people that applied, it was her and one other boy. And she excelled far beyond the guy that she had interned with. She ended up getting a job there, but it was kind of like Hidden Figures, where she went to work every day. They did not have a girls' bathroom in that building. She had to go very far away to have to go to the bathroom. She said that the guys really were tough on her. They would come in and slap her on the back really hard, and made it very difficult for her. And incidentally, it was the German scientists who had come over from Germany who were the ones saying, look, you're good at your job, stay here, just keep doing your job, don't let those guys bother you. And so she said early on, they really wanted to do interviews with her, NASA did. And she kept refusing because she said, I didn't want to stand out. It took me a long time to get accepted within this group of guy engineers. So she didn't want it to make it look like she was special or smarter or anything of any of them. However, later on, years went by. Sorry, go out, honey. My daughter's trying to come in. Years went by, and she finally decided to do an interview in the early 70s. And when she did that, she said she got thousands of letters from little girls like in 3rd grade saying, I didn't know you girls could be an engineer. And she said, I realized I made a mistake. I should have done it. I should have let other girls see that on this important Apollo 11 launch, there was a woman in the room. And so she's made it her mission for the rest of her life to try to inspire more women and girls to go into engineering. But she's been quite saddened. She said they did pretty good in the 70s, and then it went way down again in the 80s, and it really has never come back up again. So she's really hoping at some point, someone else can carry the torch, because she's still trying to do it, but she's in her 80s now. And so, I think it's up to not just the women who are in engineering, but maybe women like us, even those of us who are not engineers, but hopefully raising awareness about all the ways that people can participate in the space world. The other thing I wanted to bring up too was that, like we were saying in the beginning, you don't have to be a scientist or engineer to be part of space, though. One of my favorite things that we used to show in Buzz's speeches was an image of a woman named Hazel Fellows, who was a seamstress at the Latex Corporation, and her job was to sew the Apollo spacesuits. So that was such an important job, the attire that we wore, the spacesuits themselves and the material and all of that they sewed together. And when I brought that up to Babak Ferdowsi, who's the Mohawk guy from JPL, you might recognize him from the Curiosity landing. He said, oh, yeah, we still have seamstresses who sew the parachutes for the Perseverance rover. For all of the rovers, we still have seamstresses who work within the space realm. So I think it's important for people to understand that there's lots of different fields that they can work in within space. Sorry, I was going to go. Somebody has actually, it looks like Martina asked another question again, which was about colonizing other planets. Elon Musk estimated 5.5-year timeline. I think that is extremely optimistic, considering we need to get back to the moon first. Anybody want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I have some thoughts about this. Oh God, I'm going to get in trouble. big follower. He is a white man, but I'm a big. I've done a lot of writing, and I've done a lot of things about Gerard K. O'Neill's career. He was a Princeton physicist who, in the 1970s, wrote a book called The High Frontier, which was about settling space, but not on other planets. It was he actually had ideas for space settlements that would be at Lagrangian points. Personally, this is just my opinion, and it's the idea of, quote, colonizing space is controversial because of the wording, colonizing. There are concerns that, there could be shades of what has happened when we've colonized certain places on Earth, which is totally understandable. But it's my belief that, personally, I think the Musk idea, as much as I admire his idea, I agree. I think it's very optimistic. I think we need to worry about settling maybe or going back to the moon, as you said. I also think we don't need a planet to settle. We could do something like, something like O'Neill prophesied, or I think that's going to be honestly the way the future is. We'll probably have settlements, but they're not going to be, they might not even be on a planet. We've seen this. Obviously, it's not the same idea because space stations are, they're for scientific, purposes, and stuff like that. But the idea has at least sort of been, pre-done with space stations. We've seen how the ISS has had people on it for over 20 years now. We've seen, so that idea is sort of, already, it's not a space settlement really, but we've seen how that idea can kind of work, that it's not a place on a planet, so that's just my opinion. I don't think we necessarily need a planet to, settle upon.
I want to bring up Skylab then, that since you're talking about living on a space station, essentially. At the ISS, we typically have about 6 people there in orbit all the time. And as Nicole Stodd's husband, Chris, she told me, he said the ISS often doesn't stand for International Space Station. It stands for Invisible Space Station because a lot of people do not realize that they're humans in orbit all the time. But the interesting thing is, and I think it is kind of a lost history in many ways, because a lot of people are aware, of course, of the Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, and the space shuttle program before this. But Skylab was a really interesting program, and it was a much bigger space station than the ISS is. And I have no idea how many people did Skylab have living on that space station. Oh, you're quiet, Emily. Did you turn off your... Oh no, we've lost your sound all of a sudden.
Oh no, and this is her favorite topic. We can't... this is bad.
Hear me now? I thought I was off mute.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. It took a second because, I muted myself when you were talking. The thing with Skylab is it was not the ISS is a modular space station. Basically what they did was they took pieces up at a time and they just connected them. So it is quite large, but it was connected in pieces. They started with sort of a base, the Russian and the US sections, and they put it together and they just kind of built from that. Skylab was one piece. It was launched on one piece in May 1973. It only carried 3 people on it at a time. But if you go on YouTube, there's quite a few little like Skylab films on there. There was a ton of room in there. They probably could have put more people on there than 3, but they could do somersaults and all sorts of stuff in the orbital workshop. So yeah, I'll try to keep this real short because I could talk about Skylab for hours. But Skylab really was the direct predecessor of the International Space Station. And it does get forgotten a lot. A lot of people just they're like, Skylab, what the heck is that? And I'm like, it used Apollo era hardware. And it basically, it was a scientific platform. It studied, the human response, human physiological response in space. It studied the sun. It had a solar telescope, which was pretty, for its time, was pretty incredible. And it also studied the Earth, which is really important because we need to learn about, the Earth's environmental processes as well. I think that's really underestimated. But Yeah, but Skylab's not really remembered as I think it should be. It is the direct predecessor to the ISS, and it was an amazing for its time. It was very it was an amazing it was an amazing scientific platform, and they discovered a lot on there. Like nowadays, we see, we know now that people in space, when they go up there, they tend to grow about an inch or an inch and a half or so. Well, they learned that on Skylab, because in the first few days they were like, this is weird, we're growing an inch and a half or so, and they figured it was because of the fluid in the spine. In zero or microgravity, it decompresses, so your spine lengthens a bit. And they first figured that out up there. So, I mean, that's a very small example, but I mean, they found out probably hundreds of things that, really aided in long-term space flight, which, we see now on the International Space Station, and which we're going to see with Artemis probably. And, if we, settle space in the future, whether it's on a planet or in a space settlement or anywhere, we're going to have to know about that.
So I have a question. What is next for the International Space Station? I've heard multiple rumors that they're going to decommission it. I've heard that they're going to build a new one. I've heard other countries are working on building other space stations. What is next for the ISS?
Well, I know some stuff about this that I can pipe in about. So the space station is getting pretty old. And as you said, it had been pieced together in many, many missions where they would take different modules up. One of my friends used to be the head of space policy in the White House. So he basically extended the shuttle life by doing an agreement with JAXA, the Japanese Space Agency. So we know that the International Space Station will go at least until 2027, maybe 2028. But it's getting pretty old. And in the meantime, China is building a brand new space station. And they've got agreements with all of the spacefaring nations in the world to join their space station, which would be super exciting, except for the U.S. is not included in those agreements. There's a very complicated rule that bans NASA from speaking to China. And it is a bill that was passed several years ago by Congressman Frank Wolf, who is no longer in office. When he decided to leave, everyone hoped that this particular rule would be dismantled, but it has not been, because obviously we still have a lot of challenges with China. But Buzz and some of the other astronauts argue, well, we don't get along that great with Russia either, and yet we cooperate with Russia in space. We've been using their rockets for a long time, until SpaceX actually took the last two crews up to the space station. From U.S. soil. It had been almost 10 years since we'd actually been able to launch American astronauts from American soil. We've been using Russian rockets for a long time. We don't get along with them that great, but we do cooperate with them in space. So what's happened now is NASA is not building a new space station. There is a commercial space station that is being planned to be built by Axiom Space. Axiom Space is a commercial company based in Houston, Texas, and they are actually were formed by a group of people from NASA who built the International Space Station. So they know what they're doing. They're in some big fundraising rounds right now to try to do that. But to be honest, it's probably the most logical way we're going to get a new space station is for it to be a commercial space station, which is probably a good idea at this stage, because our taxpayer dollars are paying for all of that up there. And at some point, it would be great to have the commercial companies. I don't think it's anytime soon where we taxpayers are not going to be paying for it. But that being said, it would be better if the money is handled more affordably through a commercial company. And that's what SpaceX and Elon Musk have demonstrated, is that they can build and launch rockets for a lot less money than the typical government contracts. The other thing to note about SpaceX, Elon gets all the glory. He is the crazy front man who tweets crazy things, and he, everybody either rolls their eyes at him or they worship him, or else they think, oh my gosh, what is he going to do now? But one thing that's really important to note for people who maybe don't understand is that company is run by Gwen Shotwell. who is a woman. She is a titan in the space world. Gwynne Shotwell is the president and COO of SpaceX. So, man, she holds that ship together. She is really, really an amazing woman. Gwynne Shotwell is her name. It's spelled Gwinne Shotwell. And if you don't know who she is, go look her up because she's quite an amazing woman.
Yeah, she's my hero, FYI. I want to say that publicly.
And she's a wonderful person, too.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen interviews with her. She's so humble and down to earth, and yet, man, she can manage it. It's fantastic to watch.
She
her.
always gives the credit to her team.
Yes.
If you ask her, she will talk about how valuable her team is, and every engineer and every scientist and every part of the team. She will always say it is about this team, the ones, not the astronauts, but the team who built these rockets and did the science behind it. So, yeah, if you don't know who she is, look her up. She's amazing.
Yeah.
I think the other plan for the space station is for it to become operated by a commercial company, so that, rather than deorbiting it, instead of NASA managing it, would become a commercial company that manages it, so that, we're not losing an asset. And I had one of the, and back to Elon Musk, I think the great thing about his vision and goals, and perhaps 5.5 years is a bit aggressive for colonizing Mars, but the fact that he has them, and that's what drives him. I mentioned that when I left NASA, I'm like, no way is a commercial company going to get us to space. Well, I mean, I think the first time I heard him speak, I'm like, oh, this is crazy. And he's not crazy. He's been successful. And I think and he's driven, or my impression is he's driven by his goals, not by the revenue. And I think, that's what I really admire about all the women on this panel. You have a passion, you follow your passion. And I always tell young people when I talk to them, and my own kids, do what you love and the money will come. And so I think that that's what many people, many of these space entrepreneurs who have put their own fortunes into what we thought, or some of us thought, were crazy goals. They're not crazy. They're achievable, and they're what are moving us forward, and moving us forward fast.
Absolutely. And I think that I personally feel like when it comes to settlements of space, I think it's definitely going to be led by the private sector, especially because when you look at numbers of Americans, especially who support various types of space-related ventures, more Americans support utilizing space science to address climate change than they do human settlements. And so I think we're going to start seeing a lot more, obviously, especially given that Biden recently announced with his agenda for his administration that he wants to prioritize climate change. I think that's going to be the direction that we see more attention being put in when it comes to public dollars. And I think that's really exciting because a lot of people don't fully understand how much work NASA has put into addressing these kinds of things, including there's a possible initiative that may be launched called Earthshade that could actually help protect the Earth, give us a bit more time to fight against the effects of climate change. And those kinds of initiatives are really mind-blowing, and they absolutely rely on the benefits of space science. And I think we're going to start seeing NASA put more attention on publicizing those efforts than they do human settlements.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because so I was asked to speak in Davos at the World Economic Forum a year ago, and I was asked to speak on women in leadership, space education, and space inspiration because I ran the Aldrin Family Foundation and created educational tools, a giant Mars map, 25 foot by 25 foot topographical map of Mars, and a map of the moon for kids to run and play and learn on and do robotics. So while I was there, what was so interesting to me was being on these panels and always meeting people who say, what does space have to do with my life? Space has nothing to do with me. And I usually say, do you have a cell phone? If you've got a cell phone, if you got a smartphone, you're using a satellite right now that's in orbit. And you're using technology that Jerry Griffin, who was one of the flight controllers for Apollo, said he feels the greatest contribution that space has made, at least as far as technologically, is the miniaturization of a phone, miniaturization of the technology that goes in the phone and also the cameras. A lot of people don't realize that the phone camera came directly from NASA research. That's one thing that when I was on this panel and they were talking about climate change, A lot of people will say, well, we don't want to be spending money in space. We've got to do things here to fix the planet. And I'm like, who do you think is monitoring climate change? Who do you think is actually the ones telling us about polar ice caps? That is NASA. NASA working in partnership with NOAA. And so I think that if more people understand that and understand how valuable a role that NASA plays with trying to fix the problems on Earth, then maybe the support would be there. There would be more of a budget. It would be ideal for NASA to do the science and the planning and all of that, and not worry about building hardware for rocket launches and for space stations and stuff, but actually focus on science, which is what they do the best, science and engineering. And so I'm always trying to find ways, as someone who has witnessed the way that space impacts the human spirit, to also try to raise awareness about the way that space influences our daily lives. So one great example of what's happening right now with the pandemic is, pretty much everywhere you go, if you want to go in a store, or if you're going in your doctor's office or whatever, they're using an infrared thermometer to test your temperature. That is directly from NASA technology of how they measure the heat between planets, which blows my mind when I first learned about that. And then, as I dig into this, and this is where my curiosity takes me, and then I saw that the materials for the sole of the first Nike shoe, that material, which was so lightweight, was from NASA scientists who developed it to make the space helmets lighter, very durable and light, but strong. And that's what that's what Nike used for the sole of their shoes. And so there's so many things like this: water purifying, air purifying, growing food with very little water, hydroponics, that sort of thing. My husband said it the best, which was, trying to solve the extraordinary challenge of living in the stark environment of space. If you can solve that, you can use everything you learn from that to solve problems on Earth. So that's where, when I was speaking in these panels in Davos, all of these different ministers, I was like, my hair was blue and purple, by the way. And I was on this panel with all of these men in suits, very put together. And they were all talking about expanding clean energy with solar panels and doing solar panel fields and how they were going to generate energy. And so when it got to me, I said, do you know where solar panels came from? And they all looked at me blankly, and I was like, from the space program, to power satellites in orbit, to power things that are not on Earth. And so I think, that's one thing that's kind of become a big passion for me, is I've started this Space for a Better World, trying to get people to understand that we can use space to solve challenges on Earth. I personally think that space could solve the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, which the United Nations came up with, which are goals we're trying to solve by 2030. And I think that space technology research and development are the key for that. And probably, Sean, some of the stuff that you're doing, I'm sure, plays into some of that. What are you working on right now?
We have a few different contracts at Goddard Space Flight Center with satellites, so Earth observation satellites, and a couple of the programs are exactly what you mentioned, NASA, NOAA partnerships. So satellites that monitor weather and also measure climate change. To your point earlier, if you can't measure it and can't monitor it, can't fix it. And so, in fact, I mentioned that my first love was human spaceflight. But, one of the things that's easy to be passionate about space, some of the images that come back from those satellites of that beautiful ball, many are in geostationary orbit, so 22,000 miles above the Earth, that look back at this beautiful planet. And they look like works of art. But they are also measuring those, polar ice cap melting, and giving us early notification of the crazy weather that happened a couple of weeks ago, that in the past would have, still caught people off guard, I suppose, with some of the power outages, but not as off guard as they might have, even 20 years ago. So those are the kind of programs that we are currently working on. And whenever I get bored reading a contract or, dealing with an HR issue, I go back and look at those images of what we get to do every day. And it's pretty inspirational.
Yeah, there's a great story I posted on my LinkedIn recently about how using satellite technology to keep track of the elephants, which is really, it's much harder to do on the ground, but from satellite, they can see the elephants and they can keep track of them. And that's to try to figure out ways to keep them from being poached. That's one interesting way. And then there's a scientist down in Australia that I know named Brad Norman. There was a big CNN story on him recently. And what I love about him is we went snorkeling with him with whale sharks several years ago. And he uses NASA star sighting software to track the whale sharks all over the world to help save the species. He said that software was the only solution he could find that would look at the spots on the side of a whale shark and be able to keep track of them. And then that's how he tracks them all over the world so that he can see their migration patterns, because, he's trying to save one species, but he's saying it's not just about one species. If you see the behavior of one starting to change, it's usually a chain reaction throughout the ecosystem. And that's where, again, using satellites, using this kind of software that was developed to measure stars or the distance between stars is being used for real life applications trying to save a species on Earth. That part is so exciting to me. And that's the thing, is if I can help raise awareness about that, the ways that space can also help solve challenges on Earth, then maybe we can get more support and more funding into NASA so they can focus on those things that help the planet.
And I think by prioritizing those things as well, it's going to help us really address the talent gap issue that kind of plagues the space industry. I think by having people better understand how space, again, benefits our everyday life in a myriad of ways and how it's going to help really save our planet in the next few decades, I think that's going to really help bring in new actors, including more women into this industry.
Yeah, definitely. There's a group of women in Africa called the Black Mambas, who I think are trained to deal with poachers who are trying to come and shoot the elephants and rhinos and some of the other endangered species. So it's interesting to see what women are doing when they come together and how much you can get done when you're coming together. Well, I'm seeing a few little comments coming in here. People are posting some things. So if you pay attention to the chat before we sign out, I see there's Genevieve has posted rebalance.earth. And thank you, Genevieve. I see that link. I'm going to check that out. So I think we're almost coming up in the last few minutes of our session. Does anybody want to pipe in about something that we didn't touch on?
I think we should go to Mars and colonize. I think we should have that goal and go for it. Why not?
Well, the funny thing is my daughter says to me the other day, when Perseverance was happening, she was like, how long did it take to get there? And it took, I think, about maybe, 6 months to get there.
But only because Mars and Earth were aligned just right, which only happens every 2 years. So
the orbit,
about 9 months.
Yeah, the orbit between the Earth and Mars and the Sun have to be just right to cut that time down. And then it's a minimum of 18 months to come back. And so I said this to my daughter, and she said, well, wait a minute, but does that mean I just come right back? And I said, oh, no, you can't just come right back. You're just going to have to stay on Mars forever. She said, what? And I said, well, okay, no, maybe you can stay there for a few years and then you can come back. But you can't just get there and then come right back, because it's a long ways away. It took you a long time to get there. And she said, don't you try to talk me out of going, Mama. I do not think that I'm going to be on Mars missions. We talked about that earlier. I would go to the moon, but definitely not going to go. I don't think I will go to Mars. But
I'll only go if Matt Damon's there.
Oh my gosh, Sean, are you a Matt Damon fan too?
Oh yes, of course.
Oh my gosh, same here. That is wild.
Well, The Martian is an awesome movie, and Andy Weir, the author, I know him pretty well. The funny thing is, before I ever met him, and I read the book, The Martian. I don't know if you guys all read the book as well, but at the end of the book, there was a Q&A section. It was a digital version, and it said, what would your ideal day be? And he said, sleep in late and have brunch with Buzz Aldrin. And so I read it and I was like, Buzz, we got to call him. And so we did. I tracked him down online, and then we did a Skype like this first. And then one thing I really noticed, if you've seen The Martian, the movie, and if you've ever read the book, the spacecraft, the big one that takes the crew between the Earth and Mars, is based on Buzz Aldrin's Aldrin cycler system, which is a system he developed using a trajectory that creates a sustainable cycling orbits, meaning that you go between the Earth and Mars just using gravity assist to swing around the planets, and it uses very little fuel. So when I saw that in Andy Weir's book and in the movie, I said, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's Buzz Aldrin's cycler system. And he's like, yeah, it is. I took some liberties with the propulsion and the spacecraft design, but yeah, it is. And I was like, darn it, why didn't you give him credit for it? So I would always say to people in Q&As, if you've seen The Martian, you have seen Buzz Aldrin, at least a basic version of Buzz Aldrin's vision about how we would go and land things on Mars. And so it's an exciting time to get into space, especially, you know, for women and girls. I think that now is a good time to find ways to get involved with it. And it's only going to get more exciting. We're going to have way more rocket launches. I live here in Florida. So does Emily. So we hear them a lot. You know, sometimes at night I'll hear a rumble and I'll think, what is that? And then I realize it's a rocket going up. So if once the pandemic opens or the world opens up, you know, when we're kind of somewhat back to normal, I hope everybody can come and join and we can all go to a rocket launch together. That would be a lot of fun.
I'm coming. Sign me up.
Yeah. All right, ladies. Well, thank you for your time. We really appreciate all of you who are tuning in as well. And there are a lot of different sessions going on today and tomorrow. So come back and see some of the other conversations. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.